Welcome, everyone, to the Cluster Puck Podcast, part of the MHRT Network here at Center Ice. I am Nick. Beside me here is Brit. How's it going, Brit?
How's it going?
Good, good. Before we get started, let me just read this off real fast. Yeah, we can remove you. Okay. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow the MHRT Network so you can get notified when shows like the Cluster Puck Podcast go live. You can follow them on the various social media platforms of your choosing. If you do want to follow us, you can follow us at the Cluster Puck Podcast on Facebook and at Cluster Puck Avs on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Okay, well, Britt, it's the last Thursday of August, which means September is here, which means in just a few weeks, we're going to have our rookie development showcase, which at least means hockey's here.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty much in like the last of it. I mean, it's going to be here before we know it.
Exactly. So it's just holding on for a little bit longer. However, I think it is kind of time we kind of start to delve into kind of the season, upcoming look ahead, stuff like that. I know we've kind of already done some placement of where we think the Avs are going to be in the Central Division, but I kind of want to do the matchups one-on-one on what this division's going to look like compared to what the Avalanche have. And before we do that, there was also the NHL Network put out a list of the top 20 certain position players. And four Avalanche men made that list. So we'll get talking into that first before we go into the divisional stuff. So that being said, this was throughout the last week or so, NHL Network on the various social media platforms, but I found this one on Twitter, put out their top 20 of positions in the NHL currently, right?
Yeah.
And four Avalanche men made that list. So I kind of want to talk about that and see if is that an accurate placement? What can we expect from these people going forward? Stuff like that.
Can I just go right into where the math ain't mathin' for me?
We can start there, sure.
If Nathan MacKinnon is the best player in the NHL, according to his peers and those that elect them for the Hart Trophy, how would he not be the best center in the NHL? I guess that's just something I'm having a hard time computing.
They have their methods, but that is the place we will start then. So as far as centers go, top 20 in centers, Nathan MacKinnon checks in at number 2.
No.
I kind of agree. It doesn't make the most sense.
Considering
he just won the Hart Trophy.
Does it specify that it's for this year or last year or like?
Well, it compares him to last year's rank, which he was also number 2 last year.
So if anything, while Connor McDavid may be the best hockey player in, all encompassing in the NHL or in the world or whatever, but last year, Nathan MacKinnon was the best. I mean, especially if they're doing it year by year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and it makes sense. I would also pin him at number 1. I think the logical answer is whoever the Hart Trophy winner is should get number 1 in their position.
Inherently,
inherently, exactly.
Like Norris also.
At Norris, I think Conn Smythe should be also taken into consideration. Which obviously they did, because in this case, the Conn Smythe winner and the Hart Trophy winner also, they were kind of right there. So I still feel like the Hart Trophy kind of has more bearing.
Oh, for sure. Especially when it was like the yuckiest Conn Smythe, other than the one where what's-his-face was like crying. I don't think that there's ever been a more undesired Conn Smythe.
That wasn't Giguère, was it? Who was that?
Yeah. Yes. Wasn't it him like crying? Wasn't he crying? Yeah.
Yeah. It was on the Ducks as he was accepting the Conn Smythe. It was just like I get it, but it's I guess that's a good question. What do you think is a bit more frustrating when there's the Conn Smythe winner for the losing team where he takes the picture and he's all sad that he won it, but he's at least out there, or to kind of do what Connor McDavid did and just not show up, period?
Oh, I see. And I don't want to say like I don't like Connor McDavid, but like I don't love him. He he is so uninteresting to me. And I find people weird who are elite in something, but like really don't ever show much joy in it. Same with Nathan McKinnon's the same way. But I give him no beef for not coming out. Like to me, that was a leadership thing. Like it's not, he needed to be there with his team to mourn and to like unwrap those feelings, and going out there and celebrating or even just accepting. I mean, honestly, I think that was one of the most badass, like personality filled things that he's ever done.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's yeah, I don't know. But he checks Nathan McKinnon, going back to him, checks in at number 2. Obviously, you knew it was going to go down to the wire between him and McDavid, but they give McDavid kind of the go-ahead. I can't really see why, just from at least this last year overall. We're having fun?
Yeah, sorry. My big dog. Oh my god. My big dog
slamming or something.
Yeah, a basket full of socks.
Oh, there you go. It sounded like they were having just wrestling match. Anyway, but I mean, you knew it was going to go down to the wire, and I guess overall, yeah, Connor McDavid is like, he has been better over the years, but
yeah,
if they're going year by year, inherently it needs to be Connor or Nathan McKinnon that has that first
right. Especially when Nathan McKinnon just like has this black cloud over him where he kind of gets screwed, because he was like so obviously the best the year that Taylor Hall got the Hart Trophy. Like every Avs fan knows about that gig, but they kind of had to give it to Taylor Hall because it was an anomaly, and last year was kind of an anomaly. Like Nathan McKinnon was better than Connor McDavid, and that's like, so the rules like kind of just seem to sway the opposite. You know what I mean? The exceptions or whatever of Nathan McKinnon, like, if that makes sense.
It does, and so. I mean, obviously this is just their consensus, right? And obviously we have ours and whatnot. But I feel like,
woo, there it is.
Yay, okay. There she is.
It was supposed to make life so much easier, but I'm figuring it out.
Good. There you are. But I think inherently, though, we all kind of it's kind of the handshake deal. Like, we know who really is number one, considering what he just finished winning. So that's Nathan McKinnon for you, checking in. A number 2 of centers for this year. Oh, and the camera just went away.
Why?
You had it. Nope, you're back.
Okay.
Hands up.
Just gonna keep it exciting.
Okay. Moving on down the list here, we'll go to Mikko Rantanen, who checks in at number 3 on wingers. Now, this one is interesting because he basically fell on deaf ears throughout the entire season. Nobody really considered him as like a dangerous, force to be reckoned with and all that kind of stuff. But yet they'll check him in at number 3, which is, considering all the wingers that were on that list, it's a pretty healthy list.
Right.
I fail to understand how you could not recognize him throughout the whole season when he's actually playing, recognize him for his accolades, how well he actually did, and then throw him into a 3rd spot at the end, at the beginning of this next season, and be like, oh yeah, he would, easily this and easily that. It felt like a double standard.
Last year, I'm trying to pull it up.
He was at number 4 last year, so he went up a spot.
I think last year he was the best in the NHL. I mean, he carried
had a career year.
Yeah.
So
he's just one of those guys who's never going to be properly recognized because he's not dramatic enough. He's too I don't even know that, I can't even think of the word, because he's not boring, but he's just sly. He's under the radar. Like
it's to a point where, to me, it's like he does this by clockwork and people kind of expect that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, Rantanen scored again, all that kind of stuff, where it's like, you need to kind of, I feel like, recognize the accolade a little better, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, and there's just so many other people that they're talking about that if he went out there and did something dumb, honestly, it would probably get him more positive attention in the long run, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And he's not this polarizing player like you said. He's kind of just keep his head down and works. But it's just strange to me how, and I'm trying to find the list of the two wingers in front of him.
I think Allie's right, except for Draisaitl. Like Draisaitl is the most talked about second best player on a team ever. I mean, deservedly so, but I will, if he never leaves the Oilers, I will always wonder what he would have been able to do without being on McDavid's team, or you know what I mean. And I don't think Connor McDavid carries him, but I don't think it hurts by any stretch of the imagination. Like, it's certainly not.
Yeah. And so the only two people on the list, I believe, let me make sure that was right. Yeah, is Nikita Kucherov at number 1 and excuse me, Matthew Tkachuk at number 2.
And see, Tkachuk had kind of a down year, didn't he? Up until the playoffs,
I don't felt like it. Yeah,
really, seemed pretty underwhelming. I mean, Kucherov, it's pretty much a given. I mean, when you consider the three of them running for their run for the heart, those three have to be the three highest, spots in their respective positions. And I love Matt Tkachuk. It's not, I dream about someday we're going to get Brady Tkachuk when he's ready to bounce and get his own. I was thinking after he got to spend time with Matt celebrating, he would be sick and tired of losing and being miserable. And honestly, I would love him on the Avs so much. He's not quite the same personality, but man, I'm a Tkachuk sympathizer. I love all of them.
Yeah, that's good. Is he going to hop on the Avs with Sidney Crosby? Is this kind of in that same pipeline
together? See, and Forsling is Allie is talking. I'm just, me and Allie are just having a conversation, and everyone else can just kind of hang out with us. Yeah, Forsling is, I feel like maybe being overblown because of where he came from. He was a waiver pickup, but I don't think that he's good in comparison to what people expected or hoped from him, but I don't think he's quite as good as people are making him out to be. I have a feeling he'll kind of fade back into a normal good player, but not, same with I think that Bouchard's going to kind of do the same thing. There's people who have one standout season, and I think I talked about this last week. They ride it, they make a whole career out of it. They sign 8-year contracts, they win awards, they're discussed within the media, no matter how mediocre they are. They'll spend the next 5 years talking about why he's having a bad year.
That's and then they kind of,
and it's well, he only had one good year, so
it's that snake oil year, where it's like he showed out, he had just the season of his career, so to speak, but then he just kind of falls back into that same pace.
Someone picked up on on waivers, that magnifies how incredible a really good season is. And I don't think he's bad. I just don't, he's not this world breaker that everybody has been talking about him like he is.
Yeah.
I think he just had a really good playoffs, and he's going to go back to normal. But
yeah,
man, he was sixth.
What's that?
He was 6th.
Yeah, they posted Forsling at 6th place. So again, I know there's a lot that they are taking into consideration, but I'd like to see NHL Network's criteria that they're basing it off of.
I know, and who's doing the determining? Because there's some of them.
Is it by council? Is it 2 people? Is it one guy? Yeah.
Because honestly, even the awards, the NHL's awards that they give out, the Vezina is picked by the GMs, isn't it? And it's there's so much bias that goes. I believe it's the Vezina. One of them is picked by the GMs. One of them is picked by the media. Some of them, it's just that's, and I don't know who the proper person is, but you'd think that there would even be some kind of statistical, just AI program that they could plug it into to determine it.
Yeah.
And then you could step back and take a look at the emotional factors, the random little things that come along and kind of push someone over that can't be equated for by a computer program. Yeah. But I don't know.
Because I think my only issue with it being strictly computer is I worry that the computer would go based strictly off of stats.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I agree. And I don't, yeah. So, but it just seems like GMs are such, they're working a position that leaves them open to have so many emotional biases that
it's a bit too subjective.
I mean, honestly, and it's speaks to our golden boy, but you'd have to think that the Ted Lindsay is the most legitimate testament to who the best player in the NHL is, because the players, they're going to be honest. You know what I mean? And especially in this day and age where there's so much less hate than there was before. These guys are like working out in the off seasons with each other, when before there used to be true hate, and you wouldn't associate with the other team in any way, shape, or form. And now they all share trainers, they all go to dinner with each other, they're playing Xbox together. So you have to look at the Ted Lindsay and think that that's the truest, the truest who really is the best, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I mean, Nathan MacKinnon won the Ted Lindsay as well, right? Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that, going back to Nathan MacKinnon again, it kind of, even Connor McDavid said he was the best. Like,
right.
I don't know. Right. I need to get off of that wagon.
And especially when a lot of these guys, like I always say, elite athletes, like a lot of them truly are people with almost, I don't even want to say autism, but like such incredible, like narrow-mindedness, like obsessive compulsive.
Yeah. Like, attention to detail.
Yeah. Where they're unable to focus on other things, almost to a point where they lack in other places in life or struggle. And guys like Connor McDavid, they I like totally just lost my train of thought here. Okay. Where was I going with that?
That's a good question. When you come back to it though, let me know. We'll jump back on that. But anyway, back to Mikko. I think third is pretty accurate, considering
honestly,
the company
higher
he's
than I would have expected.
Yeah, I would have put him top 5 for sure, because I mean he rocks that top line with Nathan MacKinnon, fantastic. I mean, don't get me wrong. So to put him at 3, I'll take it. Right, like it's a pleasant surprise type of thing. So I would say I'm always down for a number 3 if you're only behind a guy who won the Stanley Cup and a guy who almost beat Nathan MacKinnon for the Hart Trophy. That's pretty good company. I'd say.
And especially when Rantan's not even in the discussion for the Hart. You know what I mean? Like he's not even. So he's just being able to be acknowledged is shocking to me, honestly, because usually they get on their storylines and they get stuck on them. But maybe that's what I'm saying. Maybe his bad press with Beef and Lekkonen's dad is what kept him in people's minds. A little bit of bad press kept him relevant.
Maybe it was a scripted beef. You know what I mean? Yeah. Well, very good. Okay, moving on then to defense. The Avalanche have 2 that made the top 10. Yeah. I think this one doesn't really come to much of a shock to people, but Devon Toews checks in right at number 10.
Yeah.
I find this one to be fair. I can see how there would be, aside from Cale Makar, 8 other players that could do just as well. I feel like if anything, he could slot up at like number 6 or 7. Yeah. To be completely honest, but 10, I can respect.
He's fly. He's under the radar and he's not loud. I mean, there's a lot of people. Long Island certainly knows what he's worth, but other than that, a lot of people really don't. And if he wasn't on Cale Makar's people, I don't know, or on his line, I don't know if anyone would. Really, a lot of his like namesake comes because people tune in to watch Cale Makar, and then they also get a nice little Devon Toews show, but. Yeah. Honestly, Devon Toews didn't have a great year last year. So it's nice to see him on there. And honestly, with Makar, I'll make the same argument and prove that I'm not like a totally unrealistic fan. I don't know that Makar was the best defenseman in the NHL last year. I don't really believe that he belongs there, in the same way that I don't think McDavid belongs there, even though he is the best in the world. I think that Cale Makar is the best defenseman in the world, but last year I don't think he was the best. Yeah, looking at the season as a whole.
And I think you're right. And so for those of you who don't know, Cale Makar checked in at number 1. So you bookended this top 10 list.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I would agree, though, because we literally just had this discussion of if you won that award, in this case, the Norris, then you should be the number 1. And that
Right.
would, technically speaking, go to Quinn Hughes. And obviously, we don't want to turn around and 180 ourselves and basically lie in front of everybody. I
Yeah.
think Hughes would be the number 1, knowing, just like with what you said, Cale Makar is the best, right? It's
Yeah,
just going into this season, he didn't win the Norris, and therefore needs to be slotted back to number 2. Nothing because we don't like him. Obviously, we know his capability, but for his off year and still be number 2, that's still really good. I mean, come on.
This is the list that I have like a lot of issues with this list, honestly. I don't like, honestly, I would rearrange every single thing pretty different. Like Brent Burns being number 10. Are you freaking kidding me? I think that's absolutely Brent.
I do disagree, but it does make me happy that he's there just because of
I love him.
Sharks
I mean,
bias.
but that's absolutely insane.
Yeah,
Charlie McAvoy coming after John Carlson, unreal. And I know that there's like a crowd that is so ready to be anti-Tampa Bay, and I'm not, but Victor Hedman sucked last year when you consider exactly, dude. Perfect. I swear to God, this is just the Allie and Brit night.
We should just have you guys talk.
No, but I mean, and that's not to say that Hedman is not a world-class defenseman. He's certainly on the downswing of an absolutely incredible run, but he was not, absolutely not. And frankly, Roman Josi really wasn't either. Charlie McAvoy needs to be way up there. I don't know if sometimes it comes into a struggle with grading defensemen when people have differing like overall expectations from a defenseman, people who value offensive defensemen or people who value defensive defensemen or people who just want both. But Quinn Hughes won the Vezina, and he should absolutely 100% be number 1. He had an absolutely phenomenal year. I do think he's going to struggle to be recognized his entire career because he's a small dude. And there are people that simply will not respect smaller defensemen, but I will. And I hope you're ready for like 10 years of me arguing in favor of the Hughes boys for everything, every second of the day until all 3 of them are gone. I love all 3 of them, and he deserved it. And I hate that he just.
Oh, she must have dropped off. So we'll get her opinion here when she's finished. But I do want to jump back to Devon Taves real quick before we kind of move on to the divisional look aheads. But posting Devon Taves at number 10. I think the reason that he's able to slip in, despite the fact that he didn't make his presence known and he doesn't have that offensive-minded capability like the other people in front of him do, I think it's because the fact that Devon Taves simply doesn't make mistakes, so to speak. Obviously, he has and he will, right? But his game is just very sound, right? Like he's always where he needs to be. He always does what he needs to do. It's easy for him to be able to manage the ice, so to speak. And that's something that a lot of these up and coming defensemen, even because we've talked about the NHL changing into a more offensive minded defense role. Devon Taves still keeps that mentality of a defenseman is there as the supporting role, right? His main priority is not to score. Excuse me. Sorry. His priority, a defenseman priority, is not to score per se, but it is there to keep the opposing offense in check. And that's kind of where I find Devon Taves to excel the most is he takes away lanes, he takes away passing opportunities, gets in the way of things. His whole game is just unflawed in his philosophy of the traditional defenseman, and he plays that, I think, better than most, if not better than all. Because you'll have people like Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, that kind of thing, where yes, they do have those great defensive capabilities, hence why they are defensemen, but they also tend to be the more offensive calibrated type of defenseman. So for Devon Toews to crack in this top 10, like I said, I feel like overall with how he does things, he does deserve to be probably about maybe seventh or so, but to be in the top 10 with that with his kind of game is really respectable. I think it's an awesome opportunity for him to continue to showcase, despite it being a kind of more down year last year, to kind of swing things, pick things back up, and kind of show why he deserves to be a top 10 defenseman. And imagine this, though. It's an awesome problem to have, where you have two of the top 10 defensemen in the league right now, both of which are teammates, both of which are line mates. I feel like that could speak volumes to if stuff is happening, stuff's not going your way during the game, or you want to switch it up lines before the game. You can do so, right? If you pair Devon Toews and Cale Makar together, not very often will they have issues, right? If you want to switch it up, say your second pairing is struggling a little bit, put Devon Toews down or put Cale Makar down, and you have now a still super good, where you had, let's say, like your top pairing is here and your second pairing is here. Now you can kind of meet them in the middle and still have very, very superior defense in your top two pairings. So it's a good problem to have if you're the Avalanche. Obviously, Devon Toews just signed an extension from last season that'll kick in. You got Cale Makar for a good long while. So I mean, you're going to have a pretty good pairing for the next 4 or 5 years to come, where they're just going to keep rolling out probably these top 10 caliber style plays and playmaking abilities. And I'm honestly super excited for it. So that kind of rounds out what NHL Network has put out as far as top 20 positions. Obviously, 4 of ours made the top 10 in their respective positions. So just to run that by one more time, Cale Makar checks in at number 1 on defenseman. Obviously, we'll take it. I want to make that perfectly clear. We'll take it. Nathan MacKinnon checks in at number 2 of centers, top 20 of centers. He checks in at number 2. Mikko Rantanen checks in at number 3 of the wingers position, and Devon Toews checks in at number 10 at the defenseman position. So super good to have. Obviously, if we kind of have things go our way next year, I'd like to maybe see 1, even 2 more players crack that top 20. As far as what I'd like to see is centers and wingers more particularly, but we'd like to have a couple more of those, maybe Middlestat, Drouin, something to that effect. We'll just have to see kind of what the season holds. Moving on now, while Brit gets things realigned here. So I wanted to take this time to, now that we're basically heading into hockey season, a couple weeks away before there's that rookie showcase, like I said, then the preseason kicks right in, and then before you know it, it's regular season and hockey's in full swing. Makes me just so happy to think about. I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of pin the Avalanche against the rest of the Central Division. And what I mean by that is, how does the matchup work? Do we think it's like leaps and bounds better? Do we think maybe not quite as good? How will things shape up against Central Division opponents only? So I kind of want to go in alphabetical order with this one. Just so that way I'm taking away ranking, everything like that. I just simple alphabetical order, and we'll go into it. Let me send Brit her code real fast. And we'll get her in. Okay, perfect. So, whoops. Division, great. So, Arizona would have been the first, but we'll obviously, with their transition to Utah, we'll move them down the list. So starting first, we have Chicago. How does how does Colorado fare against Chicago? I think this one's fairly obvious to a lot of people. Now, Chicago has gotten better in the offseason. I will give Chicago that. With their additions that they've got, people coming back to people to the likes of Taylor Hall, stuff like that. Bedard now going into his sophomore year. I think it's going to be easy. Oh, hey.
We just had a power outage. It just
Oh, you're
flickered.
kidding.
Yeah, so my computer's restarting.
Oh man. Okay, so I moved us into the division outlook, how we're pinning them against the division, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So first up was Chicago. I'm going in alphabetical order, by the way. So I was just saying Chicago has gotten better, and I think with the additions of was it Bertuzzi? Yeah, Bertuzzi.
Yep.
Taylor Hall coming back, people like that. I think Chicago is going to be a better team than last year, but I really don't think it pales in comparison to the Avalanche output. So I think ultimately it's still a pretty weighted scale, really heavily in favor for the Avalanche. There does just tend to be that one, maybe two games when we're pinned against each other where for some reason we just can't seem to score, let alone win. So,
yeah, particularly when I decide to drive 8 hours to attend one, it seems those are the games that we lose.
That's right. So I'm, like I said, on paper they're better. If it were go to a 7-game series that the Avalanche would win, but it's those types of games where it's like for some reason we can never just sweep completely Chicago. I want to clean that up, despite them being a better team this year.
Yeah, it's just like what Arizona used to always do to us. No matter how bad they sucked, they were always our, just a thorn in our side. And I don't anticipate Chicago's not getting any worse. Their time is coming, but they haven't arrived.
Yeah.
We have like the Sharks kind of coming out of their rebuild, whatever you might want to call it, and they seem to be getting a little more aggressive, but Chicago hasn't seemed to quite get over that mountain of, actually jump over that hoop and say the rebuild is over.
Yeah.
I'd imagine it's coming. We're certainly probably going to be talking about them a whole lot different next year, but this year they're not, a threat of in a playoff spot or anything serious.
Yeah, I agree. So pretty easy decision on that one. I think obviously it's heavily in favor for the Avalanche to go out and be better. It's just those marquee games that I for one reason or another it tends to be while we're on this losing streak too. If you've recognized, it's right in the middle of it where it's just, and it's
when
always
we
in
need
Chicago
a win really
too.
bad.
Just weird. Moving on then, Dallas would be next. Now this one's the toughest one because Dallas, similar to Colorado, didn't get better, but
and
didn't
they
necessarily get
lost.
worse
My
per
biggest
se.
thing is them losing what's his face, their defenseman that they picked up. Yeah, I think, man, he was so good for them in the playoffs last year. I can't even fathom what their playoff run would have looked like without him.
Really?
Granted, they
You
have
think he made
so
that
much
much of a
young
difference?
talent. I really do think he is going to be a difference.
Interesting.
Where did he end up?
He went to Toronto.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, which sucks for them because he might never be that good again. A body like his can only handle so many years of torture like that. Sometimes he may have emptied the tank last year because really they could have. I think they should have beat Edmonton. I pretty strongly believe that. I think they would have been a much better opponent for the Panthers, but that's one of those ones where dudes empty the tank, like Gabe Landeskog playing on an injured leg and possibly ending his career. He may be pretty close to emptying the tank there.
Sure.
But I mean, Robertson didn't have a great year last year. I'd imagine he'll have a better one. To me, they're a huge threat. Possibly the number one threat, which is kind of standard protocol. They're not on the same timeline as us for their trajectory as far as their cup windows and stuff. but they've done such an absolutely phenomenal job in drafting the last few years that they're going to have they're kind of where we were 2 years ago.
Sure. I see. I totally agree. I think Dallas, I still think despite that loss with Chris Tanev, I still think they're going to have a phenomenal team too. Because I mean, they finished what, 6 points ahead of us?
Yeah.
I think 6 points ahead of us.
So much more consistent. They just felt so much more stable.
Yeah, and
as
we
a
even
whole.
and you and I even were in Denver when we watched Dallas live, where they just put on the
Kicked our
gas
ass.
and kicked our butts. So
They did.
to me, this one's going to
Effortlessly,
be closer
really.
of a toss-up, and I think you're right. The loss of Tanev definitely plays into that, and like I said, and the Avalanche do have some other pieces now. Their depth is a little better compared to the end of last season, so it's going to be a lot closer than 6 points. I'll tell you that much. I'm going to say the Avs get the edge, but very marginally, like maybe 1 or 2
Well,
points.
and a lot of it is going to come down to goaltending. Ottinger was
And
phenomenal
injuries.
at times in the playoffs. He struggled majorly at other times in the playoffs. So we'll see which version of Ottinger we get and which version of whatever goalie we get. That's kind of something that they've got on us for the long term, is that we don't have the long-term stable goaltending that they do.
Yeah, and I think that's something to consider. And obviously, injuries would play a factor if people are out for the season and whatnot. But this is assuming fully healthy versus fully healthy. This one's a real toss up. It's like a 50-50 split, but maybe like 50.1, 49.9. Like it's close.
Well, and
But
their
it'll be
guys are
interesting.
aging very quickly. The guys that their veterans are aging. We have a slower age out process while they have a faster age out, but also a quicker, coming up.
Yeah.
So,
And there's a couple of games. Let's see. Where did I find this? The last game that the Avalanche. Oh, come on. I just had it. I believe the last game that the Avalanche have against Dallas is in mid-March, late March. No, mid-March at home. So that's March 16th. That's the last time you'll play Dallas. And so by then, you're going to really hope that you have kind of a points advantage, because if you start to go on the skid, if you start to go on this type of skid, basically, Dallas has the opportunity to take advantage of their schedule after you face off for the last time. So by then, it's going to be like, this is one where you need to win every game that you can in the regular season. You can't split it 2-2. You definitely can't go down 1-3 or even get swept. This has to be you're winning 3, if not all of those games, if you want to make sure you have every competitive advantage that you can going into the season.
Yeah. The tone that you go into the playoffs with, it matters. When we went into the Stanley Cup year, we went in on cruise control. We were load managing, so to say. We were able to give some breaks, but this year it felt like we just came crashing in. We were terrible the end of the season. It felt like things were out of control, and it showed, all the way through the first round. It just felt like we just stumbled through on the verge of being successful, but it just felt so clumsy going into the playoffs. And that's the part where those Chicago games matter. When it doesn't matter at the moment, it's like, whatever, but they really do matter in that sense that they give you so much more freedom at the end of the season to take a breath and, settle down a little bit. And it seemed like we had just kind of found a stride when the nuke thing hit, and there was just no recovering.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. So it'll be a tough matchup, but a fun one nonetheless. I mean, the Dallas Colorado games, at least in the recent years, have always been super thrilling, super exciting. So let's hope that we come away with the season sweep. I think if we do, that would be massive going into the postseason. Okay, moving on then down the list. Let's see. Wow, we have nothing until Minnesota. So this one, again, Minnesota has always been notorious for being a tough physical team, heavy hitting, stuff like that. But lately, with kind of things that you've seen, they're kind of on the downward spiral,
They're just like mid. And after this year, things should change. We have to remember that their team is constructed with their hands held behind their backs. They've
Yep.
got I don't know what the exact number is, but it's something near $15 million in buyouts, which I just will never, ever, ever comprehend how somebody could justify. Parise and Suter were so toxic. It was worth crippling the team for, what has it been, 5 years?
Something around there, yeah. Long
And
time.
especially now that I've experienced Parise, you cannot tell me that he was the problem with that team. You cannot convince me. They've
He was
both
awesome.
continued to play successfully in the NHL through the buyout years. I mean, granted, Parise is retired now, so he'll fall 1 year short. Suter will probably play next year, definitely falling off, but nothing that would justify, what they did, buying them out so early. And so at the same time, like they couldn't just keep one of them. And even if it was a toxic environment, removing one of them from the situation wouldn't have fixed the other, or giving up some picks. I don't know. They're just they are perpetually mid forever, and that state deserves so much better, but they're so mid. And that's what, for the longest time, they never did anything other than beat the Avs in the first round. It felt like it was always like they just beat us and then they go lose.
They possessed the Devin Dubnyk card that just crippled us every single year. But now I'm kind of on the trend where it's like, forget mid. I just kind of think they're just not much more than maybe Chicago after this little, trying to rebuild type thing. I really think it's kind of going to be a fight for last place between Chicago, Minnesota, and St. Louis.
Well, they're rolling with Fleury as their starting goaltender. Is that what I understand?
Gustafson, I think, is their starter.
Okay.
But
He is the starter.
Fleury will probably get plenty of minutes, though, I'm sure.
Right. But Gustafson's also not, I don't think he's bad, but I don't think that he is the, like, Darcy Kemper that leads the Coyotes through a playoff win. I just don't. Sometimes I feel kind of sad for them because they're like the Avs and so under-discussed in the media and just kind of that flyover mentality and not barely acknowledged, but they really are. If they weren't the Minnesota Kaprizovs, like, what would they even be?
And that's kind of the question, is like, without Kaprizov and now to an extent Boldy and these kind of guys that were these up and coming young guns, which they're laden full of talent.
Yeah.
But right now it's the development of those guys, but then you have all the older guys, but just that there's something not gelling in Minnesota right now that used to be just not even 2-3 seasons ago.
Yeah.
So this has got to be the season of determining, okay, are we going to scrap it all and rebuild, or are we going to try and go out and get some veteran pieces?
I don't think that they will. It seems that there has to be something with their ownership that they absolutely refuse a rebuild, because they have really could have been due for a rebuild for the last 7 years. I mean, essentially since the Avs began their ascent, McKinnon grew as a player when he kind of had that breakout. It feels like we kind of swap places, and we've continued to grow, and they've continued to just fall apart.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. So this, to me, it's got to be the year of, okay, you're going direction A or direction B. You can't do both. But either way, against the Avalanche, I have the Avalanche heavily favored in this one.
Yeah.
Despite the physical game, the Avalanche don't need the physicality. They kick your butt with speed, right? And so that's just something that Minnesota has a tougher time against, and even with people to the likes of Marc-Andre Fleury who are able to catch things like that. But I don't feel like Minnesota is going forward. It's kind of a 2 steps backward, 1 step forward type of thing.
They might be battling for a wild card spot, possibly, but there's just really a very high top end and a very low bottom end in our division.
And I think that's exactly right. Okay, moving on the list here, we have Nashville. This one's going to be interesting. See, Nashville to me,
They're the problem.
is gonna be a problem. They have all of a sudden gone from barely scraping into the wild card spots for the last few seasons to they are going to be a contender for first place, right?
And
It's
they are
going to be
faced with, they are, would you say they're the winners of the offseason, it seems?
they are one of the three that I had, but I'd probably say more so than anyone. They're one of the three winners that I
And
put
so
on the
then
offseason.
add to that the whole thing. So with the Ryan Johansson, for those that haven't really followed the story, so Ryan Johansson, we traded to the Flyers. He played a game with us, scored a goal the day before we traded him to the Flyers. He got to the Flyers, and they were immediately going to reassign him to the AHL team. And he said, "Oh man, that sucks, but actually my hip is hurt really bad. I need to have surgery on it. So I will not be reporting to the AHL team." And they put him on LTIR, and then he got his hip surgery, and they went and just a couple weeks ago terminated his contract, and the wording was really weird. Do you remember what the wording was? It was
Oh,
something like
hang on.
a material breach,
I can
almost
tell
as
you
though
right now.
he hid his injury and then used it when it was convenient for him in order to not report to the AHL, which honestly, I can't blame the guy. He's been a first line center his whole entire career. And then to get assigned to the AHL, I do believe that he had an injury. He was so awful with the Avs. And when you consider the level of player he was prior to that, I don't see any way. It was speculated far before that he had some kind of injury. So
Yeah.
they terminated his contract, and now it sounds like they will be filing a grievance to that. If his contract is successfully terminated and the Flyers are free of it, that also frees up $4 more million for the Predators because they had retention. So if he
Yep.
gets out of that, otherwise they will have to reinstate the contract and do like an LTIR thing. But I think they're going to be able to terminate that contract, and the Preds have $4 more million. Whoop! My phone's falling, and that's $4 million can buy you a lot of really important crap.
4 million can go a long ways if you know how to spend it.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Top off the roster.
the language on that from the Flyers is due to a material breach.
Yeah, it's such weird wording, but from what I understand is like hiding an injury and then using it as a card to like a get out of the AHL card. There's no way he was going to go play in the AHL, honestly. And I always kind of wondered if it would come back on the Avs that we hit his injury, but he literally scored a goal the night before he was traded to the Flyers. So I don't know. But I can also see if you're fighting your ass off to stay on a cup contending team, you're willing to put surgery off. But then when you
go to desperate measures,
exactly. Things hurt a lot more when you're probably a lot more motivated to take care of it when you're not playing for a cup.
I'd agree.
So I don't blame him, but it's not really, the Avs didn't hide anything or do anything nefarious, but that's terrifying to think of them having $4 million more.
And that's the crazy thing, because you look at how things ended with Steven Stamkos in Tampa, which, well, that's a whole thing of as that's poor form for Tampa's part. I'll just go out and say that now. But
it's good for the Preds because
great for the Predators because they pounce on an opportunity to have an outrageously good veteran presence.
Who's angry?
A Conn Smythe winner who Vegas was also not willing to pay, and Jonathan Marchessault.
And a leader, a good vibes guy.
A really good defenseman in Brady Shea. So I just the fact that Nashville is able to just sweep all three of those is outrageous to me because it's like what Vegas, Carolina to an extent, and Tampa were not willing to do, I think is going to ultimately go out and not only bite them in the butt, but is to Nashville's benefit. And that's kind of what scares me is because it's all Central Division, right?
I know. Send them somewhere else. I wish the stars would have aligned that if Gabe didn't work out, Stamkos would have been such a seamless transition.
I would agree. I would 100% agree. I mean, I would have even been tickled pink to have Marchessault.
And I think Vegas is I think both teams are going to deeply regret. And I know that I go on and on and on about you need your locker room guys, but I think that these are two emotional leaders that they are going to very much look back and say that was not the best choice. We should have just paid a little more money.
And I just think it's wild because It's a Conn Smythe winner, literally the season before last.
Had a great year last
Had
year,
a
even in
phenomenal year
comparison
last
to
year, and then on the other side, on Tampa's side, it was your captain of 10 plus years.
literally Mr. Tampa Bay Lightning. Wasn't he
He's
with
on the Mount
initial
Rushmore.
team?
He's on the Mount Rushmore of the Lightning. Like,
And then
it's
with
like,
Marchessault, I mean, he was the last of the Misfits, wasn't he?
was one of the last of the, I think the last of the Misfits. If I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken. So,
Which
and then
that's
with
the
Brady
end of an
Shea, I
era,
think it was a
man.
business decision. Obviously, it's going to hurt them a little bit, but again, that's something where it's like Brady Shea could have easily, I think, been retained from Carolina. They just chose not to go after him.
Yeah,
I think.
Carolina. They made
But
some bad
but
choices.
either way, I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting off topic here. But as far
No,
as against the Avalanche, though, this is going to be one where it's like, if you're not careful, and I say you're, not only for the Avalanche, but this could go for Dallas, everyone. If you're not careful, this team is going to not only win the President's Trophy if everything gels the way they want it
and
to,
ride it all
and
the way to the
they
Stanley
could
Cup.
easily find themselves riding their way into the
Especially
Stanley Cup.
when you consider last year they were absolutely horrific. And then they turned it around, because they were deprived of the
They
huge
caught a
sponsor.
white hot streak at the
They
right
went
time
into
and
the
got in.
playoffs with what, like a 10. They went on a huge winning streak after a huge losing streak.
An
So it's
outrageous
full
winning
of
streak.
dudes that know how to turn it on, and you know what I mean? Like they don't get stuck in slumps or
Yeah.
stuck in a losing mentality. So they're very dangerous, and they have Saros hasn't had the best couple, like the best last year. Askarov essentially almost took his spot,
Yeah.
but he just signed an 8-year contract, 8, 6. He needs to
Yeah.
earn it. Like, he's got something to prove next year, and at his best, he is one of the best in the world. And he's not
Yep.
old, and he's not really like super injury prone. So
He's not
they're
tall.
very, very. If their stars align, the league, not even just our division, the league is going to be,
The
and
league
they're going
needs
to
to
be
be
talked
on
about a
notice.
lot. They
Like,
had their off season was loud.
It was spectacular. So if there's anybody that's going to have a target on their backs, I think finally at long last, there's no longer the target on the Avalanche's back.
Right.
It's on Florida and it's on Nashville.
Which,
I
fortunately, very rarely does the off-season winner go on to win the Stanley Cup, it seems. It feels successful, but doesn't seem like it usually works.
And I think for reasons that you and I are exactly talking about, like, whoa, this team is fully stacked. We got to play better. And that's exactly that's exactly what I'm saying here is when you're playing Nashville, close it down. You got to do you have to be on your A game, because you know that they kind of have this swagger about them now, this newly found swagger that they haven't had since when they made it to the Stanley Cup final back in 17?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and they're due, and they have a great fan base. I mean, they have right now, they've got everything it takes to win the cup. So
yeah,
just pray that they don't get another $4 million added to that, because
that's right.
to pretty much fix every problem that they do have, or that they'll find out that they have. So
I agree. Okay, next on the list here is St. Louis.
the
I know a
brand
lot
new
of
owners of
I know a lot of people want to call St. Louis our rivals, and I do have a bitter distaste for them. But at the same time, it hasn't been much of the heated rivalries since probably the Stanley Cup run back a couple seasons ago, because St. Louis has just kind of not steadily, they've
if
kind of
anything,
sharply
we
declined.
need to appreciate them, because they just made our path through Edmonton significantly easier. I mean, that's all that I can think about in all of this, that I don't even care about, like, them being jerks. Them royally screwing Edmonton's roster and throwing them into absolute chaos has done nothing but make the Avs life easier. And now they have to pay these two dudes way more than they're worth. So they're decent, but have they done like anything in the off season
besides those two? What the crap am I thinking of? They went and offer sheeted those two guys. Besides pulling off two of those that haven't been done for like 10 years.
Who was it? Holloway and
I can't remember their names all of a sudden, but
That's how insignificant they are. It was such a bizarre.
they're like an AHL caliber player, but they're kind of like the Yaroslav Askarov of like their position, where it's like
Right.
they have a ton of potential, and if it's tapped in perfectly, it could be really good for the next core of the St.
Right.
Louis Blues.
Yeah, but they're definitely
right,
like lacking an identity right now. They don't seem to
I
have any specific path, or they're not in a rebuild, but they're not, building, or they're just odd right now.
yeah, and I'm kind of in that same boat. Like I said just a few minutes ago, I feel like the battle for last place right now is Chicago,
Yeah.
Minnesota, St. Louis, just because of this build up.
Which
Maybe
sounds insane because go back 10 years ago and those were the
they're the
powerhouses. It's so
powerhouses.
weird.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's weird to think, but it's like
But it
I'm
is
not
hard
entirely
to
sure.
maintain a rivalry when we're almost to the, like with Detroit. I can pity them now, and we're getting there with St. Louis. Who do you consider a rivalry right now? Dallas? That's who I like.
I guess for right
Dallas
now
and
it's
Las
Dallas,
Vegas.
but y- personal beef myself is it's still St. Louis. I'm still very pleased every time
That's
we
fair.
beat them.
Yeah.
But I guess if you're looking as far as like wins that mean something points wise, I
Hmm.
mean every game means something points wise, but it means something a little more than Dallas for
Yeah,
sure.
I
But
agree. And it's just not a rivalry when it's not
when it's so
entertaining.
lopsided, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you want a good game. You want a reason to be like, oh, they beat us, or we
Hmm.
beat them narrowly, or
It has to be
whatever.
compelling, and
Has
yeah.
to be there has to be a storyline involved. And right now, St. Louis doesn't have a story to tell.
No.
They just kind of have a
They're
team
so
that,
not. I couldn't even tell you their first line. I mean, they're just not notable right now.
yeah, it's like I mean, it's good enough from last season to still get over 90 points, but it's
But they're
still to a
almost on the
point
verge of
where
getting to where Minnesota is,
it
where
could
you get
crumble.
stuck in
Yep,
that like
because
relentless.
bit by bit, even look at Minnesota this last season, they had 87. So it's like it went from St. Louis
Yeah.
to Minnesota and then just kind of tiered down from there. So I think St. Louis is taking that step down
Yeah.
to that Minnesota level. So maybe you're getting mid 80s somewhere around there and
Which
missing the
they just
playoff.
replaced. Did they? No, Doug Armstrong's their GM, right? Did they just
Doug
replace
Armstrong,
someone?
Bill Armstrong is Utah's
Bill.
GM.
Oh no, who am I? Doug. I can't think of who their GM is. Similar name. Supposedly, maybe has a beef with Bowman. Did you hear his talk about where he came out and somebody said, "Did you do the offer sheet like specifically to spite Stan Bowman because Stan Bowman is now the GM and
Yeah.
that was the first thing he had to tackle as Edmonton's GM." Did you hear his speech where he said, "No, I would have offer sheeted my grandma if I have to, like my grandma or my wife if I have to." So
I did not see that, but
ruthless. It
that
was
sounds pretty
very
funny.
entertaining. And I'm sure his wife was like, "Geez, dude, tone it down." But yeah,
He didn't
so
mean it.
people are speculating that it was a little bit personal against Bowman, but he swears that yeah, he would screw over his mom
Interesting.
if he needed to.
Interesting.
So
Yeah, but yeah, as far as St. Louis goes, it's not really much of
no,
a competition. Like
same as
obviously,
Minnesota.
yeah, that's similar to Minnesota. Same game style where they're very physical, but with this kind of shell of a core,
And none of the excitement of
and
Kaprizov. So
and
really, they're less
none
exciting.
of the excitement other than a goaltender with anger management issues. That's really
Yeah.
it,
And they're stuck with him still for like 5
and
more
they're still
years.
going to have him for a while. So
It's never going to end.
there you go. Okay, moving on the list here, we have Utah. This
This is
one's
the
going to be
wild
fun.
card, the
This one's
actual
going to
wild
be
card.
interesting because Utah was one of my 3 winners from the offseason, particularly
Yeah,
because of
yeah,
the likes of getting Mikhail Sergachev, who, if he plays healthy, he's jumping right back into that top 20 list of defensemen.
exactly.
John
Another big
Marino.
regret of Tampa's.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I just can't believe what Tampa did. John Marino, who, again, solid defenseman, and if he finds his kind of that family center core, that this
Mhm.
defense has gotten all of a sudden better, which
Yeah,
for
did he come
Andre
from the Caps? Because I was hoping the
he came
Avs
from
would
the
get him.
Devils. He came
The
from the Devils.
Devils.
Yep.
Oh,
Ian Cole, who brings in defensive
bleh.
veteran presence, despite his
Toxicity.
off ice antics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, and just this just this slew of young gun talent. Dylan
They
Gunther, Logan
definitely said
Cooley.
we're here. Like that's what with
They
Chicago, they
Utah
haven't done that, but Utah has
Utah's
made a
here to
big
stay.
statement.
They weren't messing around. Like, I think
And
if
they've
anyone's
got,
made a jump, it was
yeah,
Utah in the Central Division.
their goalie, what's his name?
Connor Ingram.
Yeah, we've seen Connor Ingram at the top of his game, and Connor Ingram at the top of his game makes 49 saves for a 49 save shutout against the Colorado Avalanche. So people need to not underestimate them or him. I mean, I truly think that they are the top contender for a playoff spot outside of the Avs, Dallas, and what's their faces? Like
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm kind of the opinion that if Utah plays all their cards right, they were trending in such an amazing direction before in Arizona last year, before all these rumors of relocation came out and their 14-game losing streak happened. They were trending into a position to snatch that first wild card spot.
Yeah. Well, and with the amount of resources and excitement and just emotional energy being poured into them, can you imagine the rejuvenation? Go scroll that roster. That is a heck of a roster.
It's a super solid roster. It's amazing. And their goaltending tandem, like by themselves, they're not elite, but together they make a pretty good tandem, right?
And you don't have to have Vasilevsky. Like
exactly.
It's not always the Vasilevsky team. It's consistency, stability.
They're both around kind of Georgiev's numbers, a .90 save percentage
on a more regular basis.
Yeah, so really it's just if Utah keeps their heads down and plays just kind of what they need to, knowing now that there's no longer any of those relocation rumors. You got fresh ice, fresh jersey, fresh location.
And really, I hope they do. It's going to be so good for the franchise. You need
I
a
think
good year
I
to
think you're exactly right. Yep. And being the homer that I am, living literally 30 minutes away from the arena, I'm definitely going to go to their games.
Yeah.
And so I get to see the Avalanche go there too. That'll be fun. Going to rock my Avs gear in the Delta Center. It's going to be great. But comparatively, obviously, instead of singing the songs of Utah, this is an Avalanche podcast.
Check out the Utah
still
podcast.
Won't pale in comparison. Yeah, they still won't necessarily be as good as Colorado. No. Colorado will still have the upper hand on him. However, it's still one that it's like, if this could be a team similar to Nashville last year, where if they catch fire, the roster that they have built around them now with these new pieces could be pretty lethal.
Yeah,
maybe
and
not
these
necessarily
guys,
win the
guys
cup
that have stuck
lethal,
it through, Schmaltz and Keller, and they've got to be so ready to win. And the support from the fan base, like, it matters. The resources and the support from the ownership, instead of feeling like the bane of the NHL's existence, they're now the new shiny toy, and they are literally going to have everything they need thrown at them. The Smiths sound like the best GMs you could possibly ask for. I don't think that there will be any need left unmet. I mean, I think that they deserve it, and I think that it's coming to them. And there's some guys that definitely could have left without blame or being shamed. But I think that they're going to possibly have career years just because.
I would agree.
All
just
the vibes.
Tap into the hype. I think you're exactly right. Not to mention that they built a practice facility just 10 minutes north of where I work. So
nice.
Gonna maybe pop a visit and watch their practices from time to time.
I would.
So
if I lived by the Avs rink, I would go every day. People would just assume that I was like a
if I lived in Denver, I would be the Evan Rawl, Brendan Vaught type person where I'm just going to practice every day.
I don't understand how more people aren't. It's disappointing, really, is what it is.
Yeah, so I'm excited for Utah's season, obviously being the Utah resident that I am, but ultimately, as far as their season is concerned, they have the roster, they have now the financial backup, kind of NHL ready, getting their stadium.
And I just enjoy how like not offensive they are. They're just not nearly as annoying as the Knights. Like it's just
Yeah.
easier to not hate them.
They've already got a hatred from Calgary, so there's going to be a great hatred there because you
God,
drafted
they have
Susie
so much
Ginla,
young
so
talent. They're in a couple
it's
years.
it's saturated with picks and young guys,
Yikes.
dude. It's crazy.
And they have like 17 first-round picks
Like
the next 3 years.
incredible. It's
They're
incredible.
gonna have to,
Yeah.
and they're gonna start offloading them for some serious talent.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. I thought maybe the Matthews deal would walk him into a relocation, but now that they're not in Phoenix anymore, it doesn't seem. But at some point, they're gonna need the guy, and I don't
Yeah.
know that Keller or Schmaltz really is the guy. But it'll be interesting to see who they end up developing and
Yeah, and
putting on the pedestal.
they have still $10 million of cap space. So if they're there at the end of the season or mid-season,
Yeah.
contending for a playoff spot, they could go and make a big trade for a
Yeah.
seller, right? Like they could go and I wouldn't say, I still think it's a pretty lofty expectation or hope that they'd go and win the cup, but making the playoffs and winning even a playoff round is not out of
When
the
you
question.
consider from where they're coming from, that
Exactly.
is just as substantial as it's.
Exactly. So
It is
they're not
their
going to be
Stanley
like
Cup.
Avalanche. So maybe during the regular season, it could be where they split games 2-2. I could definitely see that happening. Or I guess they only play each other 3 times this season, which is weird. But so, there's no sweep involved from either side.
I'm going to get to watch them for that preseason game. I'm pretty excited. And it's a later preseason game. So
are you going to that one?
NHL players. Yeah, it's in Des Moines.
Oh, that'll be super fun. That'll be super fun. Yeah, well, we need to get you down here
I know.
to Utah so you could, because I'm going to both of their games. So
for sure.
Wearing Avalanche gear. Hang on now. Let's wearing Avalanche.
It'll be weird because it might end up being one of those things where there's just as many Avs fans as Utah fans, but it sounds like they sold so many season tickets that it'll take a while to get there. But you know how like Avs games get really overwhelmed sometimes and it's a huge thing for
and the Grizzlies are the ECHL affiliate of the Avalanche, so there are a lot of Avalanche fans there. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was something closer to like a 50-50. Completely honest.
I mean, at least you won't get like spit on.
No,
that helps. Is it Ottawa and Toronto where they like overwhelm the rinks? I think the Toronto people like totally storm their rink because it's so
something like that. And I know that I think it's New York Ranger fans love to do that with Carolina.
Is it? That's funny. I like it, but I wouldn't do it on the East Coast.
Yeah, it's weird. But anyway, so Utah aside now, that leaves Winnipeg as the last team. To me, this is the team that probably took one of the biggest steps down.
Yeah, last year was their year.
Last year was kind of their one of better chances.
Still think they were fake.
I could be completely wrong, right? But to me, they just took that step down. So not like a point where they're fighting for last place, but just I no longer see them as
that extra
they're the ones that take that step down to maybe go toe to toe with Utah for that last wild card spot.
That's what I could totally, and I feel the same way probably with Vancouver. Those two are just like the same team to me. I don't know why, but I don't think that Winnipeg is going to be easy, but I don't see them as a threat in the long run. They'll be an annoyance throughout the season and hard to beat, but I don't think it's going to be anything like
exactly. And if you just look at your notes from last season, you kind of figured out how to break Connor Hellebuck, who had been that kind of stonewall defense that Winnipeg otherwise lacked.
We are one of the only teams that really cracked him on a regular basis. We
obliterated
his.
So if you just kind of keep those same notes from last season, I really don't find it being
Hellebuck
difficult,
Yeah.
So I mean this and Vezina winner, right? Let's give him his accolades. I respect the man, but
I don't know, and maybe it's like my recency bias because we put up a touchdown on him like just about multiple times.
Well, you got to remember though, throughout the season. I mean, he probably had some of the more stellar games throughout the season where he busted bailed everyone's butts out of games. So he needs
to get out of there. That town sucks. And they're really kind of going into a negative too. They just had what is with these prospects and their awful names? Gauchi, what is his name? not Cutter, who's the next one, who basically said he went to like some kind of dev camp and was like, this isn't going to work for me, and said he wasn't, it was their top prospect.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't see that.
Okay, Cutter Gautier. Cutter, what's his name?
Gautier,
Okay,
yeah.
McGarty, yes.
Oh,
Oh my God,
McGroarty,
these
yeah.
names.
Rutger
Where did
McGroarty.
McGarty go? And they
He went
didn't.
to Pittsburgh.
What was their return? Underwhelming. I mean, the part of the problem is you have no leverage when your prospect demands it. But that's got to be a big vibe kill for them, like super bad.
Yeah.
When it's hard enough to get people there as it is. And he sounded pretty sincere that he has no idea why he doesn't want to go there. And I'm just like yelling from the corner, it's because Winnipeg sucks to live there and exist there. So I don't know. I wonder if they're bad this year, does Hellebuck leave?
There's a strong potential. I mean, I'd say give them 2 seasons.
Yeah.
The first season, if they take a massive step down, and then the second season, if they keep going down, then
that contract was shocking to me. I thought he was out the door. He had discussed trades openly. And then for him to go sign, was it an 8-year or like a 7? Wasn't it an 8x8? Didn't they give both of them an 8x8?
Oh, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Are. Yep, there you are. Okay. But yeah, as far as Winnipeg compared to Colorado is concerned, yeah, they might have a game in hand on you, know, but this is one where it's like, I honestly feel like it doesn't matter if it's at your barn or theirs. You could walk out of there.
We're in their heads for as far as like season head to head. We're in their heads. I mean,
kind of the younger brother,
pretty handily.
Yeah, kind of the younger brother team where the tide has now changed. They're kind of on this weird sway back where if they're not careful, they could end up like a Minnesota or something like that.
And it is the Avs that truly propelled them. Like we sunk that ship and, lit their dreams on fire. They were so confident. And then we went into their so intimidating, whiteout arena and
which was cool.
Took it back. It was awesome, but we weren't fazed by it. And so you have to imagine that we're living in their heads majorly. I don't think that they've gotten good enough to where they could come back with a vengeance to, get retribution for that. I think that we're probably just gonna, if anything, I wouldn't be surprised if we just kind of dominated them, because that mental game is a lot. And that was really their year. I think their window's closed already, honestly.
Yeah, and I think you're right. So to me, it's Avs are definitely the higher in this matchup, but I think it's Winnipeg kind of struggling, clinging to whatever hope they have of probably going up against Utah down the stretch for that last wild card spot, or one of the 2 wild card spots, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, that's kind of our look ahead, or our look through the matchups for the Central Division. Let us know your thoughts, everybody, what you guys think. Obviously, we have our opinion, you have yours, but we definitely want to hear yours as well.
But ours is more important.
Ours, that's right. Ours is just better, so you can still talk. We'll just pretend that we're listening. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, let us know. Obviously, we'd love to hear your stuff, different opinions and looks of
I'd like to know, when you consider the drop off after, to me, it's the top 3. And then it's honestly anyone. I'd like to know who has there might be like a large group of people who have it completely opposite, who thinks that Chicago will be contending for that. You know what I mean? I'd be curious as to who sees
and that's kind of the beauty of that's kind of the beauty of hockey, the NHL particularly, is that there could be the unexpected that just happens, right? Just crazy stuff can happen. So that's one thing I do like about the NHL, is just all of a sudden one team can go just white hot, say like Seattle for some reason can just go nuts, and
or the Sharks. Apparently, I would say,
which I wouldn't mind. It's time for the Sharks to be back in the playoffs too. I'll tell you that much. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Brit, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you everybody for enjoying this episode. I know we went over a little bit of the Clusterfuck podcast. Appreciate your guys' viewership. If you do like what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe and follow the MHRT Network so you can get notified when shows like the Clusterpuck podcast go live. They do deal with mainly Broncos stuff, which rocking here, kind of celebrating the start of Broncos
so
season.
nice to see Broncos fans happy again.
They have hope.
They're so
they have hope.
joyous, man. It was an angry bunch last year.
Yep,
My
they
dad
have
and my
hope, though.
brothers, our family chat was doom and gloom, and whew,
should be interesting. And
yeah,
and
I think it's gonna be fun.
yeah, I'm excited to kind of see what Bo Nix can do with that team if he stays
Thank you.
healthy, and then.
Well, and God, the way people are talking about Zach Wilson, like
and even
who just
Zach
got
Wilson,
an
yeah,
abundance.
BYU's own Zach Wilson is
Yeah.
on the Broncos, and he apparently looks like a completely different quarterback than
know.
the Jets, which it's like,
Yeah.
you know,
It seems like the Jets might be a problem.
it seems like it was really the Jets that kind of didn't
Yeah.
develop him, not him. You know,
Yeah.
I have my own opinions on that, but either way, Bo Nix, we're excited to see him, obviously, and hopefully the Broncos do well this season. So we'll be supporting our fellow Denver teams. So it should be exciting there. So if you do want to follow us, though, you can follow us at the Clusterpuck Podcast on Facebook and at Clusterpuck Avs on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. With that being said, football is back. Hockey's just there. Like you can smell it coming. We're just about there. So just hold on for a few weeks longer, and then you'll be smelling the fresh sheet of ice and the lovely sounds of the puck.
It's fun stuff. We've got
tape.
some battles coming up. So really worth tuning in to training camp this year.
Yep, I agree.
Because there's some spots to be filled that might be a surprise. So
could be interesting. Could be interesting. Okay, well, we'll see you guys all next week. Have a great extended Labor Day weekend.
Yes.
And as always, go Avs, go.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Tempo's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast's racking up the flight miles. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my life.